There's probably other queer people that would love to train this sport, but because of the environment, because of the facade that sits on it, they'll never walk in the door.
The Cracked Cauldron is a podcast hosted by Ed Bolden Greer and Jacob A. Garner. In each episode, Ed and Jacob will have free-flowing conversations about life, culture, and personal growth.
No thought too dumb.
No question too deep.
The conversation starts here. Welcome to the Cauldron. Hello, everybody. It's Jacob. No Ed. The monkeys are running the zoo today. I am left to my own devices, but I assume, Ed, when you listen to this, you didn't trust me by myself entirely. So I do actually have a backup engineer. Mr. Michael is in the studio today. We appreciate you being here. So this is actually an episode that I've actually really been looking forward to for a hot minute. Ed was telling me at the beginning of the season, we always get together and we talk about what episodes. We kind of like pre-plan some of them. Others we do a little bit off the cuff, but we thought it would be a fun idea that we each do a solo episode. And I think this episode, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be recorded for audio and video. So that's super cool. You guys get to see me. I also specifically wore this shirt, which I'll explain later, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Ed, you're definitely going to listen to this in the post-editing before it comes out. So I don't know how much I'm going to be able to get away with while you're on your trip, but I figured the one topic I could definitely wax poetic about, especially something that I think people don't have much experience with, is being a twin and combat sports. But before, I do want to honor our typical Crack Cauldron thing. I wanted to make sure everybody gets to see, especially on video for the first time, the fit check. So this is just something we do, man. So I'm wearing a shirt that is more than 8 years old. It says Maryville Jiu-Jitsu. This is my old gym where we rebranded and named to Memento Combat Sports. There's only a handful of these shirts that still exist because there was only a few of us that actually got them made. So this is one of my prized possessions. I'm wearing dirt brown corduroys with fringes on the bottom because I cut them with desk scissors because I am too short for them. I'm wearing these sick Rooster cock socks that Ed and Jared got me, which was super nice of them, and some Doc Martens, and I'm rocking a big old mustache, as you guys can see. So now you know. All right. Anyway, again, I want to say thank you to Michael. Yep, this is a high efficiency operation I run here. I just ran over the cord. Thank God Ed paid extra money for these durable ones. Let's just get into it. And we're just going to do this in one big shot. So if I flub up a couple of things, if you guys hear me sipping some coffee, you can watch the video and know that's why. So, which, by the way, Ed, hurry up and come back. I'm a little out of practice with making coffee. Today, I had to make my own cup of coffee today, which is not fun. I did all right, but it's a little bit stronger than what I was expecting. So, Ed, hurry up, come back. I can't do this on my own anymore. I am out of practice. Okay. So, being a twin, okay? Not only do I have a twin, I have an identical twin, and his name's Zachary. And he is literally my best friend, which a lot of people, they say, oh, I've got a best friend. People ask me all the time, what is the best benefit of having a twin? And it's that. I know that sounds really cheesy and really, oh, that's the answer we always expected. But I tell people all the time, right? You can have a best friend in grade school. You have a best friend in college, like your first college roommate. Some people I know, they're still friends. They invite that guy to their wedding, But eventually life gets in the way. You get older, you get married, maybe you move across the country, and then you're only friends via Facebook or Instagram. And that is not the case with my twin at all. I tell people, while you can take best friends for granted. I was born with mine. And as long as he lives, I'll never really feel alone. And I've had some very lonely periods in my life, but oddly enough, when I felt like I couldn't get much lower, I would get a random text message or sometimes a random fucking phone call from my twin. And it can be something as simple as, hey man, you all right? I got a weird feeling. You doing all right? Which kind of like segues into a question that I get all the fucking time, which is, do you guys have a psychic link? And I don't know if I really believe in like a supernatural metaphysical link. I do think that having shared DNA, we split from the same egg, I think is how it actually works. I don't know. I think that inherently we can pick up when something goes wrong with the other one, because he's done that where he calls me randomly when I'm struggling and I call him when I feel like he's struggling. And most of the time it's right. And that is something that honestly, it's hard for me to describe because I don't have a point of reference at all to what is it like to not have a twin. I feel bad for you guys. I really do. Anybody that doesn't have a twin, I'm telling you, this shit's awesome. If you get reincarnated, try to roll the dice and get a twin because it's amazing. I also think that I should balance this out because I'm singing his praises so much. But I did get a listener question that I thought would be fun that I got. It was, what's Zach's best and worst trait? And I'll start with the best, right? I truly believe this, and this isn't some self-deprecating thing where I'm hoping for a compliment. I truly believe Zach is the better version of me in just about every capacity. Zach, I like to think of myself as altruistic. I like to think of myself as somebody who gives a lot to other people. But Zach truly embodies what it means to be generous with both his mind, his heart, and his finances. I have seen this man take the last $20 out of his wallet and hand it to somebody that asked for it. Or maybe they didn't ask for it. They were just talking about like, fuck, I need gas. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to have to coast home. I've seen Zach take his money out of his wallet, hand it to them without even thinking about it. There was a pretty substantial period of time when I wasn't making good money at Starbucks. Shocker. And I couldn't afford basic groceries at all. And I had one short conversation with Zach where I was like, dude, I'm really struggling. I can't even afford blah, blah, blah. And Zach believed in me so much that it was going to work out if he just supported me just a little bit, that he got a credit card, a Visa credit card, and he gave it to me. And he said, you use this when you need things. And he paid it off for years and never asked for a penny of it back. He didn't hold it over my head, didn't say shit like, hey man, I've helped you out, you know, I need some money now too. He's never asked for anything, just paid it dutifully for years. Even though it wasn't like extravagant, I wasn't going to like Target and Whole Foods buying groceries with it. Sometimes it'd be so simple that I would get 2 hamburgers from McDonald's and a small fry, which at the time was like what I ate every single night outside of food that I took from Starbucks that was getting thrown out at the end of the night. I even remember it cost $3.17 after tax. And I cannot stress enough that if it wasn't for Zach, there were more than a month of nights that I would have gone to bed hungry. And you cannot find a person like Zach. And I wasn't the only person that he helped. The amount of money he gave to our family to help them out over the years, and again, never asked for it back. I've seen him absolutely betrayed by the people closest to him, stole money from him, robbed him blind for thousands of dollars, literally broke into a safe and stole it from him. And he was devastated. I remember that night, but he didn't let it break him. He still believes that people deserve to be helped, even if they wrong him. You just can't. I don't know what else to say. I think that that's Zach's best trait, hands down. Now, his worst trait, he's ugly as hell. I think that that's pretty obvious. He is one ugly son of a bitch. I would think, if I'm being honest, what Zach's worst trait is that sometimes he has absolutely no filter. And I mean absolutely no filter whatsoever. Now, obviously, if he's around children or elderly people, he reins it in. But if he feels like he's in an environment where he doesn't have to worry about those two factors, you have no idea what's going to come out of his mouth. He makes some of the most inappropriate jokes I have ever heard, little quick one-liners. In fact, I was at a Friendsgiving last week with him, and the host, his partner, said something along the lines of, yeah, this beef that we're eating, I actually knew the cow from 6 months ago, and they said their name. And everybody at the table was like, oh, man, that's sad. I don't want to think about the cow having a name. And then Zach takes a humongous bite of the meat and goes, makes it taste better. That's just like part of who he is as a person. So, yeah, I think that that's Zach's worst trait. There was actually more than just the financial aspect of what Zach really helped me with. And that's actually the other main topic I'm going to talk about today, mainly because since Ed's not here, I get to talk about combat sports for a very long amount of time. So anybody that knows me knows that if we have a conversation, even if you're a complete stranger, if it goes longer than 5 minutes, at some point, I'm going to reference the fact that I do combat sports. And I know some people hear that and they think, oh, this is like a typical Joe Rogan bullshit thing where he just loves talking about how tough he is. It's not that. It's when something changes your life in a way that combat sports have changed mine, you can't help but talk about it. I think that the only thing I could really compare it to, and this may seem really over the top, have you ever met somebody who became a diehard Christian and they talk about Jesus and God all the time because they say stuff like, my life has changed. I was this person before, then I found God, and now this is who I am. And it influences their thoughts. It influences their conversation, who they pick as partners, how they spend their free time. In a way, combat sports, and where it started for me specifically was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It became like a religion for me. It became a rock in my life that centered everything else around it, which was incredible. So I'm going to talk about it today. So for our listeners who don't really know what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a martial art that was started by a family called the Gracies. Specifically, there was a gentleman by the name of Elio Gracie who did Japanese Jiu-Jitsu and Judo. And Elio was a very small, frail human being. He was actually, I think he had like 14 brothers or some shit like that, and he was the runt of the litter. And in Brazil at the time, he got bullied quite a bit. He got beat up. And one thing that really frustrated him is that he felt like any martial art that he tried to get into, it relied too much on strength and speed. And he really did not like that because he was neither strong or fast. So he ends up finding out about Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and he realizes that this is one of the few martial arts where a smaller dude still has a fighting chance against a bigger opponent. Your classic David versus Goliath matchup. And as you guys saw in the fit chat when I stood up, I am not a large person. I'm 5'5" on a good day, even with boots on. And when I was younger, I weighed significantly less than I do now. I did not take my nutrition seriously, and I didn't work out. So I had never been in too many physical confrontations by the time I started really thinking about combat sports. But it definitely was one of those things where, like, I got bullied when I was a kid, and I'd get shoved to the ground, and every time I stood back up, I'd get shoved back down again. There was no way for me to stop it. Or, one time at a summer camp, I had somebody sit on my chest and smush my face till I cried, and I could not get them off of me. And I remember feeling really helpless in those situations. And I just didn't think that there was any alternative. When you grow up as a young man, it's expected that you do some sort of, like, you're supposed to be tough, you can fight, and this, that, and the other thing. But I kind of ran into this weird paradox where I wanted to learn how to defend myself when I was younger, but I really hated how much I got bullied being Asian, and people making jokes, about me being a ninja or me doing karate, or like I'd be walking down the hallway and kids would just go like, wah, wah, and they would put their hands like they were karate chopping, or they would call me and Zach Jackie Chan. And I was afraid that if I tried to learn any sort of martial art, I was reinforcing that stereotype that these kids had for me. And I completely rejected it. So I end up hearing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu later in life, which is interesting. So to give you guys a little bit more context, I was never athletic, ever. I played rec league basketball. I think I averaged 5 points a game, maybe, if that. And I was terrible at it. And me being small, obviously, I could not be on the defensive or the O-line for a football team. And it just never interested me. There were also, the high school that I went to was in Loudon, Tennessee. They didn't even have a wrestling team. So I remember when I was really, really young, like 4 or 5, my dad had us do karate, which I feel like a lot of millennials, I'm 30 years old, I feel like a lot of millennials had a very similar experience, that was their first introduction to martial arts. And I obviously didn't stick with it as I got older. I was way more of a cerebral person. I cared more about poetry. I cared more about literature, typical nerd shit, video games, which was hilarious because when I played video games, I loved playing characters that instead of having a weapon, like a sword or a club or a gun, I always loved those characters that just used their bare hands to fight. And I always thought that was so cool. So before I really realized it myself, I was interested. I would imagine I could be this person, hence why I played the video games like that. So fast forward to my early 20s, I get married to somebody. And the person that I got married to, she was completely blind, could not see. And she went to a private school for the blind here in Tennessee. And in that school, she joined the wrestling team. And she was stout. She was a stout woman. And I remember when we would be hanging out at the house or anything like that, at the time I weighed like $115, $117. I was a strict vegetarian, was not doing it right. My head looked too big for the rest of my body. I was just a small human being. And one of her favorite things to do was pin me down and tickle me, and I couldn't get away. And now I know that sounds relatively benign, like, ooh, you got tickled, but there was a helplessness factor that went into that. It reminded me of when I was a little kid at that camp and somebody was smushing my face. I had somebody on top of me, could not get them off, and something was happening to me that I did not want to happen. And no matter how many times I had my conversations with her about, hey, that really makes me feel uncomfortable, I don't like that you're doing this, they would say, oh, it's not that big of a deal. If you don't like it, get me off of you, type of thing. But I didn't know how. I had no idea how. And it turns out that the only thing I could do to defend myself in this situation was I had to go mentally to a place of complete apathy. I would force myself to lay there like a dead fish and not laugh. So that way it wasn't fun anymore for her. And then she would get mad at me and say, oh, you're no fun, blah, 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 all this other shit. Well, I started looking around to martial arts schools because I thought, well, maybe if I learned how to wrestle, right, I could find a way to get this person off of me and they won't tickle me as much or some shit. And when I proposed that there was a martial arts school where they did do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because I think I Googled something like how to get somebody off of you if they're sitting on you or something like that. And it linked me to a bunch of videos and all this other shit. And I was like, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've heard of a Brazilian wax. I've never heard of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So what the hell is this about? And there actually was a school in Cookeville that I walked to multiple times and was too scared to even walk through the front door. I thought to myself, I'm too small. I don't have money to pay for this, and I always chickened out. But more importantly than that, when I did float the idea to my ex, she said absolutely not. And I think most of that probably stemmed from the fact is that she didn't want to lose whatever advantage or power that she had physically over me. That's truly what I believe. Long story short, we ended up getting divorced. It wasn't just about the tickling. There was a couple of other factors that played into it. And I moved back to Loudoun. In fact, I moved into an uninsulated attic of my best friend. His name is Logan. And his parents were gracious enough to give me a place to stay. And I slept on a twin-sized mattress on the floor of this attic that had a bunch of, it was just like used for extra storage, boxes, random stuff everywhere. And it was not insulated. So that meant that in the winter, I could see my breath. I actually ended up having to buy a sub-zero rated thermal sleeping bag just to sleep. And there were, spiders and shit all over the place. And to the surprise of absolutely nobody, that caused my mental health to be dog shit. And I end up drinking every single night and smoking weed all the time. I was just a burnout loser, had nothing going for me. So I had a laptop and I would watch videos of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because now I was like, well, now I don't have anybody telling me I can't do it, right? And I end up stumbling upon these videos called the Gracie Challenges, where the same family that started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they had 1 million children underneath them too. They would do this thing where random people could come into their martial arts school, sign a waiver, and they would just have an unsanctioned fist fight, go to the ground, choke you, break your arm, all shit. It was crazy. Legally, I feel like there's no way you could get away with it today. And they recorded these and they gave commentary. And one of the biggest aspects that was really appealing to me was that a lot of the time, the person that was fighting for the Gracies, they were significantly smaller than the other person, whether they were really skinny or short or something like that. And I started to really drink in these videos and think to myself, this is the truth. You can't fake this, man. Man, if I could only find a school that I could go train at. So when I Google a school, the closest one at the time was in Knoxville. And where I was living at the time, it was more than 45 minutes away with no traffic. If there was traffic, it was basically an hour and 10 minutes away. One way, right? So I think to myself, I'm broke, I'm a loser, I'm not going to drive all the way up there for this. I can't afford it, type of thing. So this is where Zach comes into it. Zach was working out at a gym called Anytime Fitness that was less than 2 miles down the road from where I was staying. And every time me and Zach would hang out, I would talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, how cool I think it was. Zach had taken McNabb, which was a Marine Corps martial art. And, he brawled a lot in the Marine Corps. And I remember thinking to myself, God, that's so cool. My brother knows how to fight and I don't. What if we get attacked? He's going to save the day and I'm going to cower in the corner. And I just kept talking to him about, I think I need to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I just don't know where. When he was working out in this Anytime Fitness, he calls me one day when he gets done and he goes, hey, you know that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stuff you keep talking about? I was like, yeah. He goes, I'm pretty sure there's a group of guys that do that. They go to CrossFit area where there was this purple AstroTurf where you could push sleds and do sprints and box jumps and whatever the fuck CrossFitters do. And they would take these interlocking puzzle mats that you would see on the floor of a daycare, and they would lay them down, and they would wear the traditional kimono, which is like if you know, like the Karate Kid or something like that, it was your typical like martial artist gi with a thick cotton jacket, thick cotton pants, and a colored belt to tie up everything. And I thought it looked lame at first because now I'm already starting to watch the UFC. They're just wearing compression shorts and they've got all their tattoos out and they got gloves and that's it. And I thought that's real fighting, you know? But I thought, hey, it's got to start somewhere, right? And Zach says, hey, I'll attend the first class I can and let you know if it's legit. And then if you want to come, you can come. So he does it. He goes, holy shit. Yeah, these guys are no joke. You should come check it out. So I get off work. I go down there. I meet this guy. His name is Rusty Jenkins. He was my first coach. He was this massive dude. I mean, he was like 5'10" probably, but just built like a pit bull. This guy had muscles on top of his muscles. And I said, hey, I'm really interested in learning this. I've watched a lot of videos online. He goes, cool, sign the waiver. You'll have to pay a gym membership like you're going to train working out or whatever at any time. But I work here. I've just convinced the owner to let me do this. So I didn't have a gi. At the time, they were really expensive because this sport was not as popular as it is today. And I didn't have the money to even buy the gi. So he gave me a spare one that he had. Now, keep in mind, I only weighed about 112, 115 pounds at the time. And the gi sizes basically work like most clothes sizes where depending on how much you weighed, that was the size you wore. I was wearing a gi that was designed for somebody that weighed anywhere from 170 pounds to 185. So I looked like a little kid who had taken his dad's jacket to school. The thing just swallowed me. And at the time, I was extremely lonely. I had cut myself off from literally everybody. And I hadn't actually like interacted physically with anybody in any capacity for such a long time. I remember the very first class, I sign up, I go there. There was a guy named Clay, was his name. And he smashes me in the first couple of seconds. I mean, gets on top of me and he's driving his shoulder as hard as he can into my jaw. I have never been in a fight like this before. I'd never experienced that specific type of pain. It was brand new to me. So my adrenaline is flowing through. I'm panicking. But for a brief moment, and I'll never forget this, I thought to myself, my God, it feels good to be close to somebody again. And even in that horrible panic, just awful, painful situation, I felt something positive for the first time in like a year. And I think that was instrumental in my addiction to this sport, that feeling I got. And I sucked. I really sucked when I first started. I mean, I would show up 3 to 5 times a week, you know, get on the mats and get walked like a dog. I didn't have a chance. I was just flailing around, and no matter how awful I got beat up and I would look at my bruises or my black eye or something like that, I would still think to myself, fuck, I think this is awesome. And I think I went months, like at least 4 to 6 months before I made it through a class where I didn't have to tap out. Tapping out's where you're in a choke, you can't breathe anymore and you give up, you tap your opponent, or they're stretching out your arm and they're about to break it, so you tap them so they let it go. You're basically saying, I surrender. I went 4 to 6 months of going 3 to 5 times a week before I finally got to the end of a class and I did not have to tap out. And when I stepped out the front door of that gym and started walking to my car, I broke down crying because I thought to myself, I did it. You didn't give up and you didn't get tapped. You finally fucking did it. I felt like I was like Muhammad Ali after winning the Olympics for the first time. I thought there was a quiet voice in my head that said, Jacob, you can do it. You can do this, man. And it wasn't too long after that I got my very first submission. And I mean, we were off to the fucking races. My coach at the time, he got fired from his gym because I think he wasn't 100% honest about what he was doing. And I think the owner found out and was like, this is such a massive liability if somebody gets hurt. I can't let you do this. I can't believe you lied to me. So we get a phone call from him and he goes, me and the other students, he goes, hey guys, meet me at the gym. We're packing up. We're going someplace else. He had secured a new location for us in a town called Madisonville, right downtown near the courthouse. And it was an old floral shop that looks like it had not been touched since the 80s. I mean, spider webs everywhere, dilapidated. The ceiling was falling. We had to scrape the ceiling. I probably inhaled asbestos, all sort of shit. And we really took it seriously because we thought, now we have a real gym. Now we got our own location. This is where it changes, right? And I can't tell you how many countless hours I spent helping remodel. I didn't even know how to swing a fucking hammer. But I loved it. And I was so obsessed and I was so committed to getting our own space that we did it. And we were there for a while. And then something changed about a year later. We had to move to a strip mall about 20 miles away next to a restaurant called Mexi Wing. Well, Mexi Wing 4. There was like 8 of these things. It was like, we're in this one gym, and then that's where things really started to change for me because now Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu starts to get more popular. People actually know what it is, kind of. The UFC explodes in popularity, and everybody's talking about Jiu-Jitsu. So this is where my very first kind of like street fights took place where people would sign the waiver. We did the Gracie challenges. And the shitty thing about me being smaller, I started to pack on some actual muscle and weight because I stopped being a vegetarian. My coach, Rusty, at the time, specifically picked me to fight these random strangers, these cornbread-fed country motherfuckers that would walk in and say, I don't think any of that ground stuff works. And then Rusty would go, cool, I'm going to sick this very small Asian guy on you. And when he taps you out, you're going to have to admit that there's something to this sport, this martial art. And it was like a free form of advertisement, right? But basically what that meant was every day that I went to the gym and thought I was just going to learn some cool new technique, I was going to get a good workout in, he would come up to me and he would say, hey, you see that guy over there? He wants to challenge our school. So after class tonight, save your energy because you're going to have to fight him. And that's where I first started learning how to do this stuff. It was crazy. There was at the time I was still training in the gi primarily, but I wanted to do no gi. I wanted to replicate what I saw in the UFC where they didn't have collars to grab and they didn't have belts to flip people over when you made a grip on it. Because as a smaller guy, if somebody made a really strong grip on my lapel or my sleeve, I was too weak to get the grip away. But if I didn't have a sleeve and they grabbed my wrist, as gross as this sounds, if we were sweaty, I could slip away and I could use my speed to my advantage. Unfortunately, my coach, Rusty, only taught gi jiu-jitsu. So when I told him I'm really interested in no-gi, he told me there's a guy that he trains with at another gym named Baby Joe. And Baby Joe was this prodigy. He was about my age, and he was really coming up. He was competing all the time, and he was doing very, very well. And him and another guy named Jonathan had decided to open up their own gym in Maryville, right? He says to me, Jacob, if you're really interested in learning how to do no-gi, and at the time I was doing a really taboo technique called leg locks, which now, if you look into the sport, it's the standard. You have to know how to do them. But I was so obsessed with it because it was like literally like David's sling with the stone. You could take out some of the biggest dudes in the room if you could break their foot or tear their ligaments in their knee. And I finally found a niche that was like a silver bullet to all of these people. But unfortunately, if you did it at that time, gym owners and other people would get so pissed at you because they were considered very dangerous. They would come up to you and be like, hey man, we don't do that here. So if you're going to keep doing that, you need to leave. But Joe, on the other hand, was one of the first pioneers in this area that said, fuck it, it's definitely going to be part of the sport. It's changing the game. We're going to teach it. So he links me up with Joe. I show up to his classes, and these classes were extremely small at first. I used to be so obsessed with the sport that I would sleep 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours a night, drive from Lenore City all the way to Alcoa, which was an hour away one way. And I would train at 6 a.m. I would go to work, get off work, take a shower at the gym, and then continue to train. I'd go to 2 classes a day. And this is where I started competing, and I started to get very, very good, which was awesome. Then I remember a big piece of advice I got from a guy named Terry, where I was complaining about having to drive so far all the time. And that, man, I just wish there was a gym closer to me, or I wish I lived closer. And he said to me, coming to the gym's a lot like a girl that you want to sleep with. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he goes, you'll find a way to get to her. And I was like, fuck, I think he's right. And then that reminded me of something that was difficult. I was closeted the entire time I met these people. And you kind of have to, in these environments, you have to be kind of bro straight coded and give an air of like, oh, I'm a macho man, I love women, blah, 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 this, that, and the other thing. And I was really struggling with that, because you'd be in rooms where everybody was calling people the F slur and making jokes that people were gay. And there was always this joke that the sport itself is very gay. And I think as a natural reaction to a lot of homophobic men, when their sport was called gay, they would act even straighter and more hyper-masculine. And it just made me feel like I was walking in 2 different worlds, where I had this sport and this community that I loved so much. But if they knew who I truly was, they would hate me and they would ostracize me. So there was a weird dichotomy there. Eventually, we end up switching gyms, switching locations. To the new location, we switch names to Memento Combat Sports. And when we're there, I'm hanging out with Joe, who at this point is one of my closest friends. And I make a comment about my partner. And I use he, him pronouns when I said it. And I remember Joe's face, eyebrows, everything just kind of lit up when I said that. And I thought, fuck, I accidentally just outed myself. I can't believe I did that. And I start to apologize. I'm like, please don't treat me any differently. This is just who I am. And then in that moment, Joe just goes, oh, hell, man, I don't give a shit. You do so much for the gym, dude. We don't care. And I was like, well, please don't tell anybody. And it was this beautiful moment where I finally felt like 2 different parts of me had met, and I could finally be myself in this sport that I love so much. And that meant a lot. That meant so much to me. And now I'm an instructor at the gym, and I've got fantastic training partners. I don't compete anymore. But I was talking to a young student. He was 16 or 17, right? And he's talking about like, oh, Jacob, you're so good at this sport. You're amazing, blah, blah, blah. Why don't you compete some more? And you really could make a good run out of this. You could be the best. And I've said it once before, but I'll say it again. I know I will never be the best at combat sports. I just know it, right? But combat sports was the best thing that's ever happened to me. So I wanted to change something. I wanted to change because I was sick that even though some of my closest training partners knew that I wasn't straight, it still felt like a hostile environment. The jiu-jitsu MMA community, right? And I was talking to my twin about 3 years ago, and I said, man, it just fucking sucks that you and I can't be our true selves. Let me grab a sip of coffee and do this sport. There's probably other queer people that would love to train this sport, but because of the environment, because of the facade that sits on it, they'll never walk in the door. And I thought about how much it changed my life, how much it gave me purpose and direction. And I thought, fuck, if I can do that for one other person, it'll be better than any medal that I've ever could possibly win, right? So we looked around, and obviously there was no places that that were very queer friendly. So then I said to Zach, why don't we fucking do it? You and I have enough experience. We're going to wait. We can wait till we're old and can't teach it. Or we can go put our money where our fucking mouth is, put a target on our back, and if somebody has a problem with it, we'll fuck them up. But we need to do this for our community. So that's what we did. It was scary. I had to talk to Joe. I had to talk to the other co-owner of the gym, Dan, about us potentially doing this. And while we did make some concessions, like we couldn't advertise it, we couldn't say, come down here if you're gay. We couldn't put up posters and talk about it. They were afraid of, obviously, the backlash. You know how the political lens is. You get review bombed. People start saying shit like there's pedophiles here, all this other stuff. So we made that concession, and we started teaching a self-defense class on one of the weekdays that was available. And it's been growing ever since. And I think that for the first time in my combat sports life, my tenure, my career, I finally felt like I was doing something that mattered. I wasn't just beating people up and patting my own back and lifting myself higher because I can do this now. I've been doing it for 10 years. Now it finally felt like there was a purpose to it all. And I like to think, right, that there's going to be a student that we may already have one in the class, that never considered that this was something that they were capable of, that this was something that they could see themselves doing and actually accomplish because of the gatekeeping stereotypes around it. And then they come to our class. They discover this self-worth, this value that they now have, these skills that they can learn, their adversities that they can overcome, the pain, the discomfort, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe they go out and they become really good at this sport. They change their lives. And in quiet, subtle ways, they'll change another queer person's life. Because they can look at them and say, I can do it. If they can do it, I can too. And then they'll change that kid's life or that person's life, right? And eventually down the line, even if I'm dead and gone, right, there's going to be somebody somewhere in the future that they're going to ask their instructor, who's queer, where did you learn how to fight? Who was your instructor? And they're going to say, there were these two fucking weirdo Asian twins that just popped up out of nowhere and they taught me how to fight. And even if my name doesn't get spoken, my purpose for why I'm here lives on. And it's going to be worth it. So I don't really have much else to say about that. But yeah, I really appreciate the listeners listening to me talk about it. I always love talking about it, obviously. So if you're interested, I think, Ed, if you're going to do this in post-editing, I'd love to plug the class too. Obviously, you know how important it is to me. But to the listeners, I appreciate you guys letting me ramble on about it. If you're listening and you're not in the area and you're considering, is this something I can do? You heard where I started from and where I'm at now. So you can do it. Even if you don't believe in yourself, I'll make it up the difference. I'll believe for you. You just go in there and do it. It'll change your life. All right. That's all I got. Thank you guys.
Now, family, you adults have a few chores to do. Go on over to ravensvale.com and see about doing your chores on social media. Follow us on all the social media platforms that we've made available just for you folks. Like, listen, subscribe, and follow wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you don't mind, leave us a good rating and a kind comment. You can find The Cauldron on your favorite podcast platform. And again, make sure you hit that follow button to stay up to date with our latest episodes.
The Cracked Cauldron is a production of Small Raven Media. Today's episode was hosted by Ed Bolden Greer and Jacob A. Garner. Audio engineering and sound design by Nick Devan at Nicky D Sound. Copyrighted 2025 Small Raven Media. All rights reserved.